Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our latest survey methods webinar. My name is Eric Harrison. I'm Deputy Director of the European Social Survey at headquarters. Today, I'm pleased to say we've got one of my colleagues, Nhlanhla, who's going to be talking about an aspect of the UKRI's Survey Futures project on which he's been working. So I'll introduce him in a second. But just to say, it's the usual format. Nhlanhla will talk for something in the region of 40 to 45 minutes, after which there'll be some time for questions. If you would like to lodge a question at any time during the talk, you can do so using the Q&A function, which is at the bottom of the Zoom screen. The Q&A, please, not the chat. And then we'll come to those and I will chair a selection of those questions at the end of the piece. So without further ado, I'd like to give Nhlanhla the floor.
Thank you, Eric. As Eric has mentioned, my name is Nhlanhla. I'm a research fellow based at City St. George's. I've been working on the Survey Futures project. Now, this part of the presentation today is going to be about recruitment methods for surveys that field interviewers, and it's what we found in the literature review as part of this project. Okay, I'm gonna go on to the next slide. So really for introductions, in terms of what the Survey Futures project is about, this is funded by the SARC as part of the Survey Data Collection Methods Collaboration Project. It's also known as Survey Futures. It is directed by Professor Peter Lynn from the University of Essex and is a collaboration between 12 organizations with the support from the Office for National Statistics and also the SARC National Center for Research Methods. The aim of this project really is to deliver a step change in survey research to ensure that it will remain possible to carry out high quality surveys in the UK. This project has an extensive research program with different research strands and sub-projects. You can find further information on the link here. So it's www.surveyfeatures.net. Now, this presentation today is part of a research strand focusing on methods for surveys that field interviewers and a sub-project that's on recruitment methods. I would like to acknowledge other members of that of the sub-project. So Dr. Christian Domachi at University of Southampton, Professor Peter Lynn at the University of Essex, Professor Rory Fitzgerald at City St. George's, University of London, Associate Professor Olga Maslovaskaya at the University of Southampton, and Dr. Ruxandra Kamunari at City St. George's. Now, the outline of what I'm going to talk about today is as follows. So we'll talk about the process of the literature search, and we'll also look at the invites and reminders, including pre-notifications, invitations, and questionnaire access and reminders. We'll also look at response modes, focusing on single mode and mixed mode designs. We'll also cover some aspects of recruitment materials, such as survey sponsorship, postage, and envelopes used in the surveys. We'll also look at incentives. This will be in relation to presence, timing, type, and amount of incentives. And then we'll draw some conclusions with some take-home messages. Now, for the literature, we conducted a systematic search in the first half of 2024 to identify literature on self-completion surveys from 2017, although we did use older literature for reference. We're particularly interested in surveys that used address-based sampling frames. This is the main sampling frame that is used in the UK, though the literature was not limited to the UK only. We considered recruitment practices as well as survey quality indicators such as response rates, representativeness, and survey costs. And we searched various databases, including Web of Science and Scopus. We found a wide range of literature, and this included a useful document, which was a Cochrane review on methods to increase response rates to postal and electronic questionnaires and self-administered surveys. We also had some systematic reviews and some meta-analysis. We found also some peer-reviewed experimental studies. We did also include reports and some gray literature. Now, in terms of invites, and specifically looking at pre-notifications, previous evidence from the literature has shown that pre-notifications were effective for interview-administered surveys, but it is debatable whether they remain effective or indeed relevant for self-completion surveys. Some surveys actually will prefer to use an additional reminder when recipients have the questionnaire in hand than pre-notifications. However, in terms of what we found from the literature was that there was evidence to suggest that pre-notifications continue to be more effective than not offering pre-notifications in both web and mail surveys. Response rates were higher when pre-notice was used compared to when it was not. The impact was actually more so when amongst older respondents in mail surveys. So these were respondents who were age 50 or over. Notably, these studies did not compare the impact of an additional reminder in place of a pre-notification. Now, the ONS, on the other hand, actually, they conducted an experiment to investigate the impact of different letter combinations to an online survey and tested 3 experimental conditions. In their experiment, sampled households were randomly assigned to 3 groups. One had received a pre-notification letter, an invitation letter, and 1 reminder. The second group received an invitation letter and a first reminder, just 1 reminder. And a third group received an invitation letter, a first reminder, and also a second reminder. Now, of interest in relation to pre-notifications was a comparison between the first and the third groups, in which an additional reminder was used in place of a pre-notification. Now, evidence actually from this suggested that there was no significant difference in the response rates when the pre-notice was used in place of instead of the second reminder. Now, in terms of invitations and questionnaire access, the mode of contact is really influenced by the information that's available from the sampling frame. In address-based sampling frames, mail is the most used mode of contact. However, in some circumstances, such as longitudinal studies, other information might be available. From our search, we found that in mailed push to web invitations, offering multiple modes of accessing the questionnaire improved response rates. Now, including QR code in addition to URL resulted in modest improvements in response rates than just using URL only. There was no, this was with no additional cost or burden to respondents. Furthermore, QR codes led to increase completion of questionnaires online and via mobile devices. In circumstances where information was available, such as longitudinal studies, and sending text messages with a survey link increased the likelihood of respondents completing the survey on a smartphone rather than a PC, laptop, or tablet. Now, moving on to reminders. Now, evidence is shown that follow-up reminders are one of the most effective determinants of high survey response. Um, Now, we found evidence that a strategy with at least two reminders achieve the greatest benefit to compared to one reminder. This can be seen on this table here, where one reminder was the reference was a reference point compared to two reminders and three or more reminders. However, there was no significant difference in response rates between strategies that offered and two reminders and those that offered three or more reminders. On the other hand, other studies have found that we found significant differences when more reminders were offered, but these actually had small effects. It's not readily clear from the literature, but it appears that a strategy that has two or three reminders is the more optimum strategy to use, in part because from these results here, response rates do not significantly differ between two or three reminders. On the other hand, individual studies have shown that there might be some benefit of using additional or more reminders, but the effects really were small for those studies. So in terms of cost and effectiveness, is two or three reminders appear to be the optimum number of reminders to use. Now, considering the intervals between reminders, um, strategies with shorter intervals between reminders resulted in increased odds of response than those with longer intervals. Now, results from this, so this study by Edwards, it was a Cochrane review. So it found that the odds were increased by nearly a tenth, well, just over a tenth, when shorter intervals were used, as can be seen from the output here. Now, the intervals between reminders varied across the studies that they included in their review. So a higher frequency reminder, that is the one with shorter intervals, range from between 1.5 weeks to 3 weeks. And a lower frequency reminder, that's one with longer intervals between reminders, they range from 3 to 6 weeks. So here, really, the shorter reminders, which will be in the region of 10 days to 21 days, appear to be to increase the odds of response compared to longer periods between reminders. Now, moving on to response modes. Now, for self-completion surveys, response modes can either be mail or web. Now, the table here shows just some general factors that might affect response to mail and web surveys. Now, this list is limited only to those that differ between the two modes. So there's an impact in terms of the visual design, considering a paper questionnaire and also a web questionnaire. So the web ones, basically, they need to be responsive in terms of increasing, if you were to increase engagement, especially on mobiles. On the other hand, for paper, you would want to have your questionnaire printed on high quality paper and also to be formatted well for it to appeal to people to complete. You also have personalization of the contacts. Now, there's some variations here because, on the other hand, for paper, there's some scope to use some handwritten notes, personalized letters, which can improve our response rates. On the other hand, for web, personalized emails that actually have people's name. So this would be a sampling frame that has that information available to be able to do that. And also there's the aspect of ease of completion between paper and web. So for those who are computer savvy, or tech savvy, they might be able to get through a questionnaire fairly quickly with just clicking on the web questionnaire. Whereas for the paper questionnaire, the handwriting, so if you have to write and then the mailing, it can deter some respondents. One other aspect that comes up in terms of factors is anonymity and privacy. There's accessing web always poses concerns in terms of tracking and data security that some people might be suspicious of and deter their participation. Whereas for paper surveys, they can be perceived as more private and trustworthy. And of course, one of the major factors is actually demographics between respondents for mail surveys and web surveys. Uh, Paper surveys, older people tend to prefer that, and also in places where, in circumstances where people are less computer literate, they might be not responsive to web surveys and prefer paper surveys. On the other hand, web surveys tend to draw more towards the younger population. Now, we have in terms of recruiting participants, it's always challenging to recruit younger people. So the web service might be more appealing to younger people compared to older generation. So it might be a useful component for younger people to actually increase their participants. And also people who are computer literate will prefer that. There's also device compatibility. Now, this doesn't apply to mail surveys, but it's critical when it comes to web surveys. Now, the idea is it's ideal to optimize the questionnaire to mobile when using web surveys, and this will encourage response. Now, in terms of response modes, then the other aspect that we considered was the single mode and mixed mode designs. Among single mode designs, we found evidence suggesting that the web mode consistently resulted in lower response rates than other modes. However, the web mode increased response among sample members with the highest levels of education, while actually this had no effect among participation from people with lower levels of education. On the other hand, the mail mode enhanced the survey response among those with lower levels of education, as well as older respondents. Now, comparing a single mode and mixed mode designs, results suggested that mixed mode designs yield higher response rates and produce more representative samples than single mode designs. This was likely due to offering respondents different modes of responding to the survey, which appealed to different sample members. And among the mixed mode designs now, the experimental evidence was not really conclusive in terms of the most effective design when comparing between sequential and concurrent designs. This was actually apparent in a number of the studies that we found. The output shown here shows near even odds of response between sequential and concurrent designs. So the choice mode here, so the choice mode was concurrent web or mail, and the other comparison was to the push to web. Now, the difference here is not significant. The odds is just nearly even. However, what we found in the evidence was that sequential web mail design led to higher percentages of web responses than concurrent web or mail design. consequently, the cost per response were lower for sequential web design than for concurrent web or mail design. Now, moving on to recruitment materials and considering survey sponsorship, mail questionnaires, so there's a distinction here, mail questionnaires originating from universities were associated with higher odds of response compared to those from other sponsors. Now, in this study, they did not distinguish between government departments or commercial organizations. And the odds of response were increased by a third when sponsorship was from a university, as opposed to these other organizations, other sponsors. Now, this was not the case though when it came to web questionnaires. The difference between sponsorship from universities and other organizations was not significant. As I said, so this review did not distinguish between sponsorship from government departments and commercial departments, but previous evidence has suggested that sponsorship from government departments was more effective than commercial organizations. Now, for postage and in terms of postage and considering outgoing mail, the first class postage yielded greater odds of response compared to second class or third class mailing. Now, we also found that the response rates for the first class mailing and also priority mailing, which is faster and provides tracking services, were not significant. Now, with first class, however, first class mailing was more cost effective. Now, priority mailing is actually used in the States and is equivalent to tracked 24 or tracked 48 in the UK. So that is a bit more expensive compared to first class mailing. However, the effect in terms of response rates was not significantly different. Other special delivery, such as recorded mail, registered mail, certified delivery, led to significantly higher response rates compared to just standard delivery. That was for outgoing mail. In terms of return mailing, stamped envelopes were associated with greater odds of response compared to prepaid business or friend reply envelopes. Now, the stamped envelopes sort of have a limitation because they are paid for in advance and the costs cannot be recovered if the questionnaire is not returned. On the other hand, for prepaid business envelopes, with those, the costs are only paid when the envelope is returned. So there's an imbalance in terms of cost. Multiple stamps on return envelopes increase the odds of response compared to just using a single stamp. And the choice between first class and second class mail stamps on return envelopes had no effect on the odds of response. Now, moving on to envelopes. Now, in self-completion surveys, the design of the envelope and how it's presented in terms of the mailer are critical, influencing whether people are going to open the letter that they receive. So it's important, really, in terms of what the color of the envelope is. Well, we think it's important that what the color of the envelope is, the size of the envelope, and also the branding. Now, the studies that we looked at, actually, in terms of mailing, they found that there was no difference between brown envelopes and white envelopes. Now, the brown envelope study had a higher response rate, but actually that difference was not significant. In terms of the size of envelopes as well, there was no significant difference in overall response rates when larger non-standard size envelopes were used compared to standard size envelopes. Uh, Envelope branding as well. ONS conducted a study where they looked at branded envelopes that featured regionalized material um, for sample members. So basically, what they did is they branded the envelope for different postcodes in terms of their region. So this was actually by country. So it was Scotland and Wales. They put features that highlighted that attracted that would be attractive to respondents in Scotland and also to respondents in Wales. However, they actually found no significant difference in response rates between the branded and the unbranded envelopes. Now, moving on to incentives. Now, incentives, I think evidence has shown actually that they are one of the most important determinants of response, whether people will respond to the surveys or not. The presence of incentives led to increased odds of response compared to no incentive at all. And this was regardless actually of whether the incentive was monetary or non-monetary. So monetary or non-monetary incentive compared to no incentive at all, the odds of response were higher for where incentive was offered. Um, Now, in terms of timing of the incentives, so timing would be whether offering unconditional incentives or conditional ones. Unconditional incentives, so these are the prepaid ones. They were more effective in improving response rates compared to conditional incentives. And this was even the case even if the monetary value of the unconditional incentive was lower than that of the conditional incentive. Um, Now, incentives provided with the initial invitation. So with the outgoing mail making the initial contact, that resulted in higher response rates compared to where incentives were sent with subsequent mailing. I guess this establishes trust with the initial mailing from whichever agency is sending to the recipients. Strategies that combined unconditional incentives, unconditional and conditional incentives were more effective than either unconditional or conditional incentives alone. Now, there'll be debates with this whether so the strategies that they used, for instance, would be they might send a smaller unconditional incentive with initial mailing, and then when people have responded, they are then sent an additional conditional mailing. The invitation letter would have stated that if people responded, they will receive the additional unconditional incentive. So the additional conditional incentive upon completion of the survey. Um, Now, in terms of types of incentives, monetary incentives yielded higher response rates compared to non-monetary incentives. You can see the output here. It really indicates that the odds of response are increased by nearly 2/3 when a monetary incentive was used compared to a non-monetary one. And among non-monetary incentives, a strategy that offered, for instance, a £5 gift voucher unconditional uh, with a £10 conditional voucher subsequently after they've completed the mailing was the questionnaire was more effective than just using a £5 unconditional voucher or a tote bag. Now, this was an experiment done by the ONS. Now, this did not really, it didn't consider the cost effectiveness of this strategy though, because you have an instance where if an additional £10 conditional voucher is offered to people who have responded, whereas in the for the unconditional voucher, the cost would have been similar to what was offered initially before a conditional voucher was issued. So there's bound to be some differences in terms of cost effectiveness between these. So that would be something to really think whether it's worthwhile doing. Now, small value guaranteed gift cards resulted in higher response rates than high payout price draws. With this, really is about a guaranteed incentive for some, as opposed to issuing a price draw where there's no guarantee that a respondent will win. And evidence suggested that there was no difference between a high payout or low payout price draws. Now, in terms of the amount of incentive offered, now there was no correlation actually, no clear correlation between the value of incentives and the response rates. Now, bear in mind here, I think correlation really, by definition, would be just a linear association between the two. I think larger incentives tended to be more effective than smaller ones, although the evidence for this suggested that there was diminishing returns. Now, you can see from this chart here, so this was a systematic review that found really that the optimal amount of incentives was between $5 and $15. But the increase in response rates was actually a declining rate. And thus, in terms of the higher the incentive, doesn't necessarily guarantee that you will get a higher response rates. In the UK, typical amounts of incentives are used between £5 or £10. Now, I think that's it really for the main findings from the literature review. Now, just then to draw some conclusions about take-home messages from this really would be, I think it's debatable, but pre-notifications, they continue to be, appear to be more effective than no pre-notifications in both web and mail surveys. Now, evidence at this point is inconclusive in terms of what's more effective in terms of using a pre-notice instead of a second reminder or an additional reminder. Now, offering multiple modes of questionnaire access did improve our response rates, and this was really at no. So, if we're including the QR codes, it was at no cost or additional burden to the respondent, and it increased the likelihood of online completions via mobile devices. Now, two or three reminders appear to be the optimum number of reminders for non-respondents, and shorter intervals between reminders also resulted in increased odds of response. And then the mixed mode designs were more effective in terms of response rates and representativeness than single mode designs. While real evidence is still there's still no conclusive evidence in terms of what's more effective when comparing between concurrent and sequential designs. However, with sequential web to mail designs, they resulted in higher proportion of web responses, which will be cheaper compared to mail responses, and therefore they resulted in lower cost per response compared to concurrent mail web design. Now, special delivery and first-class mailing were more effective for outgoing mail. However, to be worthwhile considering the cost for these, which one is more cost-effective, while stamped return envelopes and using multiple stamps on return envelopes was also more effective. However, as I said before, the stamped envelopes, those costs are paid upfront, as opposed to business uh, prepaid business envelopes. In terms of the envelopes, there were no differences really in response rates based on the color, size, or branding of envelopes. And the evidence was clear, or is clear, that the presence of incentives is more effective in increasing response rates. And unconditional incentives also yield higher response rates compared to conditional ones. And monetary incentives are more effective than non-monetary ones. And while larger incentives may uh, uh, may be effective than smaller ones, the effect is diminishing in terms of response rates. I think that's it really for my presentation. If there are any questions and comments.
Thank you very much, Tantha.
Yeah.
That's a formidable piece of work there. I was really struck by the massive number of sort of potential predictor variables that there are in trying to sort of affect response rates for the good. And in a way, you kind of think, well, wouldn't it be lovely to have an experiment where you can cross everything with everything else?
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
of course, it's not really practical with any kind of normal size of respondents. Thanks very much. There are a couple of questions already in the can, but just to remind people, if they'd like to add to those, they'd like to pose a question, please use the Q&A function at the foot of the screen. There is also a raised hand. I'll try and come to you when I've dealt with these first few, and maybe we can put you, Stefan, can put you on ask your question directly. So, first one, Thantha, this goes back to something quite early in the presentation that I actually made a note of. This was about the frequency and the speed of reminders
Yes.
that you mentioned. So, Kobe asks, do you have any information on the relative effectiveness of reminders that are sent even faster than 1.5 weeks after sending the questionnaire, which was a figure you quoted?
So this finding actually was from a Cochrane review. Now, the challenge with even faster reminders, bear in mind these are male, some of them are male. So in terms of the turnaround male, the time period might not, sometimes might not be feasible to be any faster. But that review didn't consider time, the studies they considered didn't include any earlier, any shorter intervals than that. But yes, I think that depends on how efficient the postal service is in terms of the effectiveness of having earlier reminders. But I can't imagine that if possible to send reminders that quickly, there probably would be some benefit to that. But it's just a matter of practicality whether they would have responded and then they get the reminder, but then is there a risk of sending the reminder too quickly where before the respondents have sent in their questionnaires, which then becomes an annoyance for respondents to say, oh, I've responded to this questionnaire, and then you're sending a reminder again. So there's that window to be mindful of in terms of what's the most optimum period to send that. It has to allow the response at least. But yes, the studies that we looked at, they didn't, that review didn't consider shorter than 1.5 weeks in terms of reminders.
Super. Eileen asks, will the slides be shared and or will the literature review be published? Well, I can answer about the slides. This talk will be available on our YouTube channel, and Stefan also routinely makes materials available to those who participated. So that's a yes. And on the literature review, Thantha?
Yes, so this actually forms part of an output for the wider survey features project as a whole. So this will actually be published as part of the recruitment methods. It will also include survey practices in the UK. So this whole section of literature search would be part of that publication. I believe it will initially be a working paper, but certainly it will be shared as part of the project.
Okay, and I'm going to go straight to a question which kind of links back to the previous one because it's about sort of speed and windows. But what is the impact of the length of the overall data collection period on the response rate? So you focus on various actions that are performed within the overall window. But in terms of when you actually bring the shutters down on data collection, is there any indication of what the optimal length for a fieldwork window is for an online survey? It says here.
I don't think we had that really, but with online surveys, I think actually, for this, because we're considering mail, so this really relates to paper, but online surveys, I think they might be more quicker than that because they don't have the lag period for postal services. So essentially, they would be quicker compared to mail surveys. But I really don't have an answer in terms of the duration for the period of the field work. Mm.
Okay, that's fine. Gareth has got a question which is very close to what I was thinking. He says, fantastic research and a great summary of that. Thank you so much. When considering the use of incentives which can lead to high response rates, does any research consider the cost per response achieved as opposed to other activities such as the follow-up field work and the reminders and all that kind of stuff?
Yes, they do. So some of the studies actually we cited in the literature, they do actually estimate the cost per response. And so yes, there is that information out there. And I think for when comparing sequential and concurrent mode designs, actually I think those results refer to cost per response, because there was no, in terms of the response rates, really there was no difference. But then when you factor in terms of for sequential designs, you push people more towards uh, web responses, which are lower compared to mail responses. The cost per response is actually lower for sequential uh, web mail compared to concurrent. Um,
Okay. Thanks. Another one here. This might be a yes or no. So on incentives, the specific question is, do you have any insights on incentives for parents, which are non-monetary? So I suppose this might be in the context of uh, maybe proxy surveys or surveys aimed at, parents answering on behalf of children or about children or whatever. Yeah, any information on those kind of specific incentives?
not really specific. I don't think we came across any studies that were completed by parents on behalf of children. However, there's sort of some different types of non-monetary incentives that are offered. I started a study here that used tote bags as some incentives that were used. However, actually, for that study, the tote bags, I think they had the least amount, so they have the lowest response rate compared to unconditional incentives, was compared to a voucher and initial one, what conditional and unconditional, and then the other one was unconditional voucher. The tote bags had a lower response rate, but those are sort of some incentives that perhaps might appeal more to parents for things that they can use practically as opposed to give vouchers. But yeah, we didn't look at some specifically at parents that completed on behalf of children.
Okay. Another question on sort of subgroups of respondents from Ashling from GGP. Thanks you for the presentation. I was wondering whether you've found any effects of offering larger targeted incentives to hard to reach groups, such as individuals with lower levels of education, but of course there might be others, I guess.
Yes, we did, but I think this that so there were some evidence of targeted incentives that actually work, but that was more of we found that more on the practice evidence review as opposed to the literature. So, in addition to part of this report, would be some of the practices that are used in the UK where they offer targeted incentives for for hard to reach respondents. That did seem to have a positive effect. But that's part, it wasn't really part of this in terms of studies, but was part of the practice evidence review that we found as practice amongst UK agencies using collecting data.
Yeah. Okay. Question from Eileen. Was there any information on the cost effectiveness of the timeliness of sending reminders? So she gives an example, as the slower gaps between reminders allows time to remove responders. Presumably that when you know that they've already completed, you don't bother them again, and that reduces costs as well. Open brackets. The CQC's NHS Patient Survey Programme send their first reminder 1 week after the first invitation, but that's too soon, too quick to remove anyone who's already responded.
Yes, so this is what I think the very first question related to this. So this was what that really is about, to be able to give a long enough period for mailed in for returned mailing to be received, and then to actually decide that okay, we don't need to send a reminder to this to this sample member because they have responded. So I think in general, there would be it would be cost effective to only send reminders to those that have not responded because you reduce the cost of mailing. Whether that mailing is going to include a questionnaire or just a reminder on its own, but it's still going to have some costs in terms of the postage. So it makes sense to delay until at least there's leg room, there's leg time to be able to respond, to receive respondents, so questionnaires that have been sent back. Um, uh, we didn't have anything specific in terms of cost effectiveness for that, but it makes sense that it would cost less to send more reminders.
Yeah, good. Staying with reminders, Polly asks, did you identify any research specifically looking at web mode for text slash email slash app based reminders and timing and frequency, and also timing of different components in a study where there may be several parts to complete?
Okay, that's a bit long.
Yeah, the thing
Uh,
in two parts, I think.
yeah, yeah.
Web mode for text email reminders and the timing and frequency, and then we'll come back to working out what the other bit means.
Actually, I think I understood the latter bit more,
Oh, okay.
so I can start with that. Can you just remind me what was it about? The
Yes,
latter bit.
timing of different components in a study where there may be several parts to complete.
Yes. So with this, actually, so it's not exactly that, but we there were some studies that looked at that split up the questionnaire into different modules. So people would complete the initial part of the questionnaire, and then once they've completed that, then they will be sent the subsequent completion. But what we found actually, that particular study found that the splitting up questionnaire modules like that actually was not helpful because the follow-up completions, the response rates were actually, the uptake for follow-up completions was actually lower. So it actually reduced response rates. So it's similar to studies that sort of break up long questionnaires into small chunks. Subsequent completions are lower compared to the initial completion. Uh, so I hope that answers in part that question. What was the first part now
The
again?
first one, did you identify any research specifically looking at web mode for text reminders? I presume that's reminders for people who are doing a web survey rather than text or email reminders sent through the web itself, or rather than on a phone. I think it's, let's say it's people who are doing a web questionnaire,
Yeah.
anything specifically to web mode in terms of things like text and email reminders,
Um, well,
opposed to
yeah, with text, certainly, I think there was a longitudinal study that used text. One of those I cited actually, they found that text messages with the survey link on the text message, actually it resulted in high response rates, but it also pushed people to use smartphones as opposed to tablets and PCs. So they're able to access the questionnaire within their mobile phones because of the text, basically. Um,
yeah. The clarification is basically means digital reminders as opposed to mail outs. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. That was what they're getting at. Good, thank you. Um, is there any information on the demographic profile of who responds best to different strategies, such as modes, reminders, incentives? Thinking some of these differences may be negligible or non-significant in respect of the overall odds of response, the overall effect sizes, but the profile of who is responding better might be a consideration for representativeness. It's a good point.
Yes, yeah. So essentially, that's one of the factors really that I think there's a table I put there that compares mail and web surveys, and certainly for web offering web, it sort of increased participation amongst uh, more people with high levels of education. That was clear. But that, on the other hand, it didn't really suppress the response rates for people with low levels of education. So it might mean that people will just respond as they do when offered, or they just choose not to respond. Um, Whereas for that's for web, and also younger people tend to prefer web, but also some other aspects in terms of connectivity that might affect whether people have access to web and whether they're able to complete the web questionnaires. So connectivity does play a part. And then in terms of mail, you also have older people tend to prefer mail compared to younger people. Uh, Having said that, also have a higher response rates in general amongst older respondents compared to younger respondents. And the other profile, I think the profiles we looked at were basically on was about the age and also levels of education. Um, but I'm sure there are some other demographics that would be affected by the different by the different methods that are used for recruitment. Um, Studies, I think, in general, also found that women tend to participate more. They tend to be overrepresented, I should say, compared to males in social surveys. Um, yes, I can't think of any other. Uh, and also, yes, so incentives did draw uh, people from more people with low socioeconomic status, so there increased response rates among those people. Um,
Okay.
yeah, yeah,
Staying with the issue of differential response likelihoods, maybe a bit niche for you, but see if you can offer any insights. Did you look at obtaining responses from fathers and mothers separately? Strategies are not likely to be the same. Also, is there any research showing differentiation between fathers who are co-resident with their child's mother and those who live separately, i.e., non-resident fathers, also sometimes known as own household fathers? So I guess this is a sort of household panel type situation, isn't it? Any insights on that?
Not much that I can offer. We didn't really look at that deep in terms of the sample compositions uh, of yeah, we didn't find much. We do have a project that looks at subpopulation groups, but that really focuses more on hard to reach populations, as
Yeah,
opposed to demographics within families.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. And a perfect seg into our next question, which is while thanking you, asks about what about recruitment strategies to reach people with migration backgrounds?
Yes, that's a separate project actually, I should say. But yeah, there is some efforts to to try and recruit people who are more likely not to that hard to reach populations because they might be more suspicious of who communicates with them or what letters they get. They might not be more responsive. Um, yeah, so some of these efforts actually include trying to use questionnaires that have use more than one, not just English, use other languages for communicating with people. So that evidence on that though is a bit scant in terms of what the effect for that is. In some studies, they didn't find any effect if they were sending questionnaires with it was actually more costly to translate the surveys to different languages. But in some instances, that tends to recruit these smaller groups of people who might otherwise not participate. Mm.
Thanks very much, Nhlanhla. Yeah, so thank you again for those questions. They were excellent and very interesting talk. And again, one of the things that I'm left with really is this vast number of predictor variables, potential, things that have impacts on response rates, all swirling around.
Yeah.
And then, of course, there's the issue of cost in there as
Yes.
well. And I'm sort of very struck between the contrast of, some contexts where you'll be thinking about, as you say, the problem of diminishing returns and just trying in a way to think, right, what's the optimal approach if we had 4 weeks or 6 weeks or something, and set that against the title of Inika Stope's famous book, The Hunt for the Last Respondent, where the process must go on as long as possible because we ideally we'd like as many respondents as possible.
Yes. Yes.
So yeah, much food for thought, and
Yeah.
as I say, formidable piece of work there in terms of the amount of literature covered. So say thank you very much once again to Nhlanhla.
Thank you.
Just to sign off by saying that we have another uh, seminar on the 10th of July. Just leafing through my pad. Um, Yes, the 10th of July, and it will be on the role of AI tools in survey research, but it will be delivered by a human. So look forward to seeing you all at that. Keep your eye on our socials for news about more forthcoming seminars. But for now, from everybody in London, it's good afternoon.
Thank you.